Hey fam, welcome to the LOFT, our very last LOFT for this season. And we've had such a great run during this time. We've covered some great issues. And tonight we're going to be finishing off with an absolute cracker. We've got Craig and Carly Davidson who are going to be sharing a conversation around to stand or to be silent. Now, the purpose of the conversation isn't to create more of an us and them divide, to pin people against each other. No, it's actually to talk about how to think about the issues rather than what to think about the issues, and how to have those conversations in a way that doesn't actually win an argument, but that actually wins relationship and creates deeper relationship with the people that we're talking to. So I'm going to invite them up in just a moment, but I just wanted to say, if you're tuning in for the very first time, it is so good to have you with us. I hope that you get something out of tonight, and I'm going to invite Carly and Craig to come up right now. So Craig and Carly, thank you so much for saying yes to coming and having this conversation. I don't want to assume that we already know who you are. There might be people tuning in that don't really know too much about you, but you have just started heading up the Collective, which is our young adults, our older young adults crew, which I'm super pumped about. You've got a little boy, Parker. You've moved up from Melbourne pre-COVID, so you've done your isolation. We're all good to go. And I'll tell you what, I'm looking forward to this conversation and what you guys have to bring. So you guys ready to get into it?
Sure thing.
Let's do it. We'll start off with Carly. Carly, how do you know who to enter into conversations with about things that you believe in? So when is it pointless? When is it a waste of time?
Yeah, that's a good question, hey, because sometimes we can be tempted to enter into some conversations that maybe aren't that profitable, I guess. But the Bible actually says in Proverbs 18:2 that a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. And I guess when I look at this, for me, when I'm deciding whether to enter into a conversation with someone, I'm thinking, is that person going in to find truth, or is that person going in to find an argument? Yeah. And if they're going in and they're actually seeking wisdom and they're seeking truth, then that's probably a conversation that I'm going to dive into. Yeah. But if they're going in and they just want to prove me wrong, or if I'm going in and I just want to prove them wrong, then I'm probably not going to have the most profitable conversation.
That's good, such wisdom.
The Bible also says that love is patient and love is kind. And I think, there's conversations that you get stuck into and you've gone in a little bit too fast and it's all about really just proving that person wrong. But what you're actually doing is getting their back up and they're doing the same thing back at you, and really no one walks away with any more truth than they started with. So I think if you can go into a conversation and the main purpose or the main goal of that conversation is to put the topic on the table and have a conversation around it and actually seek understanding from the other person, that between the two of you, even though you might have contradicting ideas, you can walk away with more truth, a more refined truth on the topic. So that's the kind of conversation I want to be in.
That's great. I love that. So in that, what would you consider a win from the conversation? What would you consider a failure out of the conversation?
I think a win is just really understanding their viewpoint. How have they got there, I think if we've walked away and they haven't felt cared for, or they haven't felt understood, or I haven't felt cared for or understood, I think that's when you walk away and you think, I wasn't me then, or I didn't understand them. And you just don't really feel like that conversation had much value. And I hate walking away from those conversations where you haven't felt understood and you haven't felt like you understood the person that you were chatting with.
I love that you talk about the purpose and the goal being the relationship, not who wins or loses the argument. That's
right.
Great. Craig, I'm going to move on. How do you argue, for better use of the word, with someone over big topics like gender, abortion, creation, and then how do you know when to stop?
That's a really good question, because there's a lot of controversial topics out there at the moment that Christians are going in hook, line and sinker and getting involved in those discussions. Ephesians 5:11 says this: expose the fruitless deeds of darkness. So there is a call on Christians to call out injustice, to name it for what it is and to address it. But we need to make sure that we are doing that with an attitude of care and advocacy for those who are oppressed by the injustice. And some of the topics that you're seeing in the media right now, it's pretty heavy duty and it's coming down hard on people, and we have a ministry of help to get in there and relieve burdens under that injustice. it shouldn't be, you shouldn't take the stance of, I want to be the authority here, or I want to be the all-knowledgeable one, or I am the guru here to help. Because that just ends up with putting yourself forward rather than truth and rather than opportunities for the Spirit to move and to soften hearts. You may be the most informed, the most educated person in town, but if you're a jerk about it, your points aren't going to land.
Yeah.
So have that humility to be open to other perspectives, because no one has 100% claim on truth in our own human minds.
Yeah.
And other people have shaped my theology and shaped my understanding of contemporary issues because they've had the good grace to share with me in a kind and loving manner. 1 Corinthians 13, I may fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, but do not have love. Therefore, I am nothing but a clanging gong. Love has to be the approach.
Yeah.
It has to be how we open the door to these controversial topics, because you've seen it. If you start talking about some of these things, people get fired up really quick.
Yeah.
So love has to be the posture. Don't be so focused on firing off your hot takes that you forget that connection is the goal. As Carly said, connection and love and walking away from those conversations with a bit more truth and a lot more kindness, that's the goal in these situations. Be kind first and be right later.
That's really good. That's really good. What context are you seeing these conversations happening? So we're talking about how do we argue with someone? It's a big difference between, I know we're going to touch on social media a little bit later on, but arguing face-to-face and then arguing on social media where you've got 25 minutes to come up with a very eloquent response.
Yes.
Can you talk about a time that you've had an argument with someone face-to-face, how that panned out? What was the...
Well, the good news is I'm quite a coward. So the arguments, the face-to-face arguments, I tend to try and dissolve them quickly. I don't actually like the confrontation of an in-person argument. And so, I do what I can to deflect with humour and diffuse it and all that sort of jazz. But when I am passionate on a topic, I try and make sure that passion doesn't overtake my heart towards the person I'm trying to speak to.
Yeah.
Because rationale goes out the window, and suddenly you just pour fuel on the fire, and then they pour it back on you, and the thing escalates and escalates, and nothing constructive comes out of that combative, militaristic. There's some people who are quite fired up by that, who enjoy the endorphins that sort of an argument produces.
But anger does bring in a positive emotion, a positive reaction.
Yes, and the thrill of that can be quite addictive, and I do have friends who take that on consistently and persistently and they're like a dog at a bone, but the fruit of it is rarely positive.
Yeah.
This is not saying you can't get fired up about issues and you can't have a justice approach to things, but think carefully and think with your heart as well as your head when you are entering the fray with those sort of interactions.
That's great. It's really good. Craig, going to keep going. When it comes to close friends and family, when it comes to close friends and family with different perspectives, how do you approach those conversations? Is there a different approach?
Yeah.
It's tricky. It's very tricky.
It's sensitive, and some of these people you live with. So you've got to be very, very careful. Particularly for me with family, quite often in terms of some of those issues with my family, I am literally the last person on earth that can change and influence in those circles because they've seen me grow up. They've seen me have my struggles. They've seen me go back and forth on different perspectives and lay arguments down and pick new arguments up. So for me, it comes back to I've got to love them first. Yeah. I've got to let the fruit of my life do the talking, not only in Christian circles and evangelism discussions, but just the way I process my thinking out loud, the way I handle controversial topics, the way I engage with the media. They're watching me. My family, my close buddies, my workmates watch and listen. Yeah. So I want to make sure that I'm representing Christ well, and that comes through humility and care. Occasionally tipping a table over in the temple, but making sure that they know that is coming out of a place of wanting the best outcome or wanting a positive resolution. So in my family, I've got family members that are into Reiki, hands-on healing, and wearing a crystal and observing your aura. And yours is looking lovely today,
okay?
Jordan. It's great. I love what you've done with it.
I've got some water out under the full moon tonight.
Good, great. As long as you're facing the North Star, you'll be fine. But they've based their life and their decision-making process around these things.
Yeah.
And so in the end, you've got to do what the Word says. In some of these elements, you've just got to commit them to the Lord and pray for them.
Yeah.
And look for opportunities, because opportunities do come to share from your heart.
Yeah.
As long as it's from your heart and they know that you love them, you'll be planting seeds.
And I've also found that the biggest voice of change in someone's life is their own.
Yes.
And sometimes it's not necessarily someone telling them what is right. It's having the discussion, getting them to think about their own beliefs.
Yes.
And in turn, you think about your own. And so we're all growing in the conversation, not just saying you're wrong, I'm right.
That's very true.
Moving through it respectfully.
And the truth is, it's the Spirit that convicts, not my eloquent words.
Yeah.
Not my rational, evidence-based arguments. It's God who gets in and can change a heart, who can make a heart pliable, sometimes over decades, to get to that point of conviction and change.
Yeah.
So the responsibility, to a degree, I carry that responsibility a lot lighter than I used to, because it's not all on me. God moves when God moves. God's Spirit does what it does, does what He does, and gets in and can soften those hearts over time.
Love it. Love it. Carly, are there any topics that you think we should avoid? Like, should we have an opinion on American politics, for example? Should we have? Are there things that we just blanket statement, don't talk about it?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, it should be the things that you're uneducated about. And look, we're diving a little early into social media here. But you see people take their platform on social media and they've read an article here or there and they've got what they believe to be a full and thorough education on a topic, and they use that platform to, I guess, provide some wisdom to their audience that may not be the wisest wisdom to give out. So I have people at the moment that I see that are giving lots of wisdom about how to handle COVID, you know, whether we should be using face masks, whether we should be staying at home, and everyone has an opinion, but actually the loudest voices with that are generally the ones that actually are not medically educated, and they're having this effect on their audience, but they don't have the wisdom to give.
Yeah. Wow.
So I think we should definitely, if we're putting wisdom out there, particularly if it's on a broader scale, I think we've got to be educated. And if we're going to be going against maybe people that do have wisdom and do have education, then we're going to have to really back that we've got our own education.
Yeah.
So for me, I just think if I don't know fully about that topic, like American politics, I'm probably not going to go putting my voice out there too strongly. Yeah. It can be an interesting conversation with your friend, like one-on-one, that's fine. But I think you need to look at the audience that you're speaking to.
Yeah. And I think also the what you are trying to achieve by having a statement to that audience. Yeah. What is it you're trying to get out of that? Yeah. It's something I always am trying to think about.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a really good, Carly.
Yeah.
Craig, so we're going to keep going with the social media.
Yes.
And going to use the big E word, evangelise. How or should we evangelise on social media, or is it just a pointless exercise?
Being a digital missionary is not for the faint-hearted. The social media is an elevated platform. So as soon as you put yourself out there, you're in the crosshairs, particularly with things like evangelism and some of the opinion-based stuff that we've talked about. But social media is social, which means it's meant to build connections, and it's meant to create dialogue. It's meant to create the connection which these arguments can be delivered over, to which the good news of Jesus can be delivered over, rather than just a standpoint, stand up and deliver a lecture. It's an engagement process in social media. You'll find more opportunities to evangelise if you listen and share, rather than just dousing people with doctrine. You can be a very experienced and knowledgeable theologian. If you don't use social media wisely, it can just be a dump, a download on people rather than engaging and sharing with people, which is a more effective form of getting the good news across. It's important when you're evangelising online, treat your contacts as people, not projects. So care for them. Say that you'll pray for them. Follow up, find out how they're going. Actually have that humanised connection with them through social media, because it's two-dimensional.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to convey your heart through social media sometimes, so you have to put in the effort. Let them know that you care for them. And don't put a timeline on seeing people saved through social media. So, if they haven't turned their life around in 3 months, then that's goodbye. I'm unfriending them. That's it, block. No, don't do that. Some of these relationships and these opportunities to evangelise will take years to build the credibility, build the love, build the reception that the Spirit can then leverage into and move. Social media encourages people to be quick to speak. If you follow some of these live conversations, people are firing off very quickly. But if you read in James 1 verse 9, the Bible tells us to be quick to listen and slow to speak. A considered response, a slow down, pause, reflect, gather your thoughts, see how God can move in this situation. How can I encase this in love before I smash the send button? Can really help when you're engaging in what is quite a sensitive topic through social media. One thing I've found, some people lose face if you have an argument with them. So I try to steer people towards books, towards podcasts, towards online articles that are credible, so that the seeds can be planted in their heads rather than the cut and thrust of the immediacy of a conversation or a confrontation. So rather than trying to engage too heavily on social media about you're wrong, God's going to get you, blah, 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 it's steer them towards resources where they can have those conversations in their own minds, and quite often that gives the Spirit of God a chance to move because their defences are down.
I mean, I guess you see that in Scripture too. I mean, now obviously Jesus wasn't using Facebook back in the day, but certainly a lot of the time a controversial issue came up, it was when someone was coming to him to ask his opinion on it. And waiting for that to happen. I think the greater concern for me is that we're going to be putting a blocker from someone to meet Jesus, not because we are telling them about Jesus, but because we're telling them about other issues in a negative way, being more about what we're against than not as much about what we're for. So in light of that, when you're engaging on social media, do you tend to deliberately not engage on certain things on media and save that for face-to-face?
It can be quite... there can be strategy in doing things at the personal level rather than through social media, because you can't, it's hard to convey emotion through a chat.
There's no context.
There's no context. They can't, you're not seeing body language, you're not getting the feedback if someone is opening or closing to what you're trying to portray. So there are some things to reserve for in-person contact. And I think more and more the way society is headed down social media, we need to be mindful of people cocooning and withdrawing away and removing themselves from these opportunities to engage and relate and communicate. So there has to be a proactivity from us to be hospitable, to be driven to build those friendships and those connections in person as well as in social media, because that builds credibility with people who are looking for relationship, friendship. There's the call that loneliness will be the greatest pandemic of the coming decade. We can address that. And sometimes it's shut your laptop, put Facebook away, go and hang out with your mate.
I love that. Carly, I see you want to jump in with something.
I did, but it's gone.
That's okay. We can keep moving. So it's interesting. Herd mentality. Social media is one of the great herders of our day that brings people together, sometimes in the most negative ways, to pin people against each other. Are you seeing that as being more of a trend? And have you got anything to speak into that?
This is really interesting. People are herd animals, so they gather in groups, they get connections, they build societies. So there's a statement about something being factually false but socially accurate. So groups tend to, groupthink comes into place, and people can be hard to shift because of their connections, because of the people that they relate to. So for example, if I was to lose my Christian belief, I would struggle with that because I would lose my connections and my social circles and my company within church. So I don't allow my thoughts to be challenged very heavily because of the risk of being isolated and alone. And it's the same with other communities in terms of people won't necessarily allow their worldview to be challenged or dismantled if the risk is that they will have loneliness at the end of it. So groupthink is one of the most powerful structures. The herd mentality is one of the most powerful structures in society today to try and address, to try and present truth, your perspective, the Word of God, the love of Christ to people who are intricately entwined in a society or a culture that doesn't accept that truth. Yeah. So that's where these things can be. It's a long game. You've got to play the long game. It's also a call for the church to be the most welcoming, friendly, grace-driven environment for these people who may have questions. They won't necessarily make the leap until they know there is a society and a safety net of people around them to call the shot. So it's up to us to love people into relationship with God, not argue with people into relationship with God. Because if someone can be won by an argument, they can be lost by another argument. Yeah. Arguing is not the greatest weapon in the evangelism arsenal. Love is. So that has to be our stance. Building community, providing safe spaces for questions, providing safe spaces for doubt. Because most people will offer that up first, and we've got to love them through it, not slam them with doctrine and shove theology into them as hard as we can. That's not the answer.
Yeah. I love that. That's so good. And one thing I heard James McPherson say, that Jesus showed clarity with charity.
That's good.
He didn't just say the truth without love, and he didn't just give them love without the truth. There has to be a balance of both of them.
Yes.
But we see that time and time again through Scripture, and I'm just thinking about the interactions that I've had with people and seeing how people sometimes just focus on a profile picture and not that there's actually a person behind this conversation that I'm having. It's something we need to actually keep in mind.
Yes.
A lot of Paul's writings in the New Testament that we use against people that are non-Christians, they were written to church members. They were written to believers, not to people who didn't know God. Whenever Jesus approached someone that was searching, he always started with love first, and the truth came. Anyway. I just love that conversation. I love this conversation with Craig and Carly. Is there anything you wanted to finish with? We're going to start wrapping it up, but is there anything else that you had pressing you really wanted to share?
Look, the question to stand or to be silent, there are times to stand. There are seasons to stand. There are seasons to go in hard. But let the Spirit of God give you the clue into that. Let your discernment decide where that is. There are times to be silent. There are times to actually pause, let people talk, let people be, let people share their truth, because that invites opportunity for you to speak into them. It's not about who's right, it's about who's cared for, and love provides opportunities for truth to come out. And I pray for myself and for all of us that we would be a people of grace in terms of how we put our thoughts, our perspectives, our rational arguments, our plausible theology forward, that it would be stained in grace and love for the other, because that's the best platform to deliver that stuff on.
Love that. Thanks, Craig. Carly, is there anything you wanted to finish us off with?
Well, I just think, love, kindness and care really is what we should be going into conversations with, and just caring for the people, loving them, showing kindness and seeking that in the relationships and the conversations that we're having.
I love that. Seeing the person. The end goal is the relationship with that person. It's not the end result of the argument or whatever you're discussing. And I think that's great. Craig and Carly, it's been so good to have this conversation. And I really hope that there's some people who are tuning in tonight that are going to be able to have some conversations with some of the people in their worlds, in their spheres of influence, and be confident going into those conversations, not to attack people, but really just to hear and have empathy and understanding. And I love what you said about being quick to listen and slow to respond. I think that's a great takeaway for tonight. Thanks heaps, Craig and Carly. Wasn't that a great conversation with Craig and Carly? We're about to head into a song that is going to be performed by John and Jess. It's going to be an absolutely beautiful moment. And I wanted to encourage you, if you haven't yet connected with Jesus, if you are just becoming interested in what it is to be a Christian, can I just encourage you to take the silent moment? You know, when you first connect with Jesus, it doesn't have to be about the lights and the sounds and the sirens and this big event. It's actually just you reaching out and saying, Lord, Jesus, I want to know more. I want to know more of you. So take that time as we reflect during this song.
I could just sit and wait for all your goodness, hope to feel your presence. I could just stay right where I am and hope to feel you, hope to feel something again. I could hold on to who I am and never let you change me from the inside. I could be safe, I could be safe here in your arms and never leave home, never let these walls down. But you have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You lead me, Lord. I could hold on to who I am and never let you change me from the inside. I could be safe, oh, I could be safe here in your arms and never leave home, never let these walls down. But you have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. Will you lead me? And I will be yours, oh, and I will be yours for all my life. I will be yours, oh, I will be yours for all my life. I will be yours, oh, I will be yours for all my life. So let your mercy, I will be yours, Lord, I will be yours for all my life. So let your mercy light your path before me. 'Cause you have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. Because you have called me higher, you have called me deeper, and I'll go where you will lead me, Lord. You lead me. You lead me, Lord. Where you lead me, where you lead me, Lord.
Thank you so much, John and Jess. What a beautiful song. we're coming to the end of the final loft. And I'll tell you what, I'm feeling a little bit sad about it. But like I said at the start of the night, this is all about starting a conversation, starting a dialogue about this topic. Not telling you what to think, but trying to teach us how to think about these issues. And if you would like to know more, if you would like to continue the conversation, next Sunday night, we have got In the Room. It's going to be led by a couple of guests, Beck Wildsmith and Bruce Robinson. They're going to be talking about ethics, and it is going to be a powerful night. So if you'd like to register for that, jump on the church website. And further to that, if you do want to continue the conversation, Craig and Carly would love to talk with you. If you'd like to contact the church office, we'd love to get you in touch with them, either via social media or just through a normal email. We'd love to connect with you. And although this is our last loft, we'd love to keep connecting with you. We're still going to be running our AM services on a Sunday. Make sure you tune into those. Have a great week. Have some great conversations with the people in your world, and we'll see you again very soon.
Who is the great King of glory, seated on high in the heavens? Oh, Jesus, you alone. You are the Lord God Almighty, strong in compassion and mercy. Oh, Jesus, you alone. And I've searched the world for a love that could fill my heart, and nothing compares to the wonder of who you are. Holy, all the earth singing holy, all the angels cry holy, Jesus, you alone. Jesus, you